Here comes a new challenger!
Hello everyone, and welcome to Not Everyone Is Here, and in this case we're talking about Master Chief, essentially the mascot, the head of Microsoft's gaming division, of course. And, you know, we already have two Microsoft characters in the form of Banjo and Steve, and if a Pass 2 was, you know, the last DLC pass, and Chief was to be one of our final two characters, then obviously some people may have an issue with me saying that because, you know, we already have Steve, and people say, well, we already have Steve, that means we already have a Microsoft character, so we can't have another. But at that point you're valuing the franchise more than, or rather you're valuing the company more so than the franchise. You don't care about the franchise if you say something like that, right? In the case of, like, as an example, let's say Mega Man and Ryu were both DLC characters, right, in the same pass, but Mega Man comes out first. Would you then say that Ryu has no chance because, well, we already have Mega Man, we already have a Capcom rep, why would we get Ryu, for instance? I think that what really matters for a franchise is its IP and not whether or not, you know, the company itself is represented. I think it's very silly to have that sort of perspective. But of course we already have Banjo and Steve, but I also say in those cases Banjo is more so a Nintendo character that just so happens to be owned by Microsoft, and Steve, well, Minecraft, despite being owned by Microsoft, you don't think of, you know, the Xbox or anything like that. You know, you don't think of that sort of stuff when it comes to Steve. You think of Minecraft, you know, because Minecraft is multi-platform despite being owned by Microsoft. And because of that, I feel that if Nintendo really wanted to you know, show that strong bond that Microsoft and Nintendo has been having recently, I think that Chief would definitely seal that deal, because Chief would represent, you know, the Xbox essentially. And to have that character that, you know, is essentially the face of Xbox, it'd be big, it'd be massive. Obviously people might think it's like a guarantee at this point, or like that there's a high likelihood of Chief showing up because of this already existing relationship between Nintendo and Microsoft. But I think that, you know, with Banjo it's kind of expected, and with Steve it's also kind of expected. And, you know, even though Chief, you know, at this point some may say, oh, he was like, if Chief were to happen, people would probably go, yeah, well, I expected Chief to show up because, you know, we already got the bear, and we already got the bird, and we have funny Blockman. so you know, I mean, if Chief happens, I kind of saw it coming. You just, no, shut up. All right, you obviously didn't think, or you didn't expect Chief to happen. If you, like, no one in their right mind is like, you may think, oh, that makes sense, but there's no way you're gonna expect it, right? Like, because you can't really expect anything when it comes to Smash DLC. I feel like any character has just as much of a chance as any other character to make it in, right? I mean, there's no character that has more or less of a chance. It's just, who do you think is more than likely? Like, who in your mind do you believe, either through evidence or discussions, that, you know, could likely show up? And I think that because of, you know, the pre-existing relationships between Microsoft and Nintendo, it is possible. And if Chief does happen, well, I'm still gonna be shocked because, you know, it's like one of those things where it's like, man, like we're living in an era where Mario and Master Chief are in the same game. Like, what? You know? So, I mean, it would be funny though if we got something Nintendo at Fortnite, and then, you know, you go, you know, Chief and Samus in Fortnite. No, I'm just gonna, I'm messing with you guys. But I do think that when it comes to Chief, I think there's a high likelihood of the character showing up. And in my personal opinion, now that Nintendo and Microsoft does have this relationship, I do think that Chief should definitely be represented in some way, shape, or form. You know, regardless of what form it takes, I do think Chief should happen, because you already have that connection, you have that relationship, you know, and it would essentially be another Sonic, but now on the same level, right? Sonic was like the console rivalry that Mario had, you know, back in like the late 80s, early 90s. But you know, for Microsoft, it's essentially the console rivalry between, you know, them, PlayStation, and Nintendo, and that was like early 2000s to like even now, right? Like that rivalry is still going on. And so I think that to say that Chief shouldn't happen because we already have a Microsoft rep would be silly, and to say Chief has no importance, like, I understand Doom has brought more to the table in terms of SPS genre, right? The first-person shooter genre. Doom has done a lot for that genre, and I understand that. But I think that, you know, Master Chief kind of, I mean, Chief 1 fits in better, I would say, than Doom, especially with how Doom's being represented now. But even then, like, that's if you say that Halo hasn't done anything for the genre at all, you know, then I'd say you're dead wrong, right? Because, you know, Halo, I mean, Doom had like multiplayer, for instance, but Halo, I believe, was like one of like the first few games that had online multiplayer for a first-person shooter, and like everyone loved it, right? Like, that's the one game I hear a lot of people who talk about franchises and like online gaming, and what really started kicking it off was that, because obviously online gaming happened, you know, it existed beforehand, like with Phantasy Star, right? Phantasy Star, it was an MMO and you could play with other people, like that was a thing. But I do think people devalue certain franchises just because they want their franchise in over another, and I think it's very silly to be like that, you know. But hey, that's just my opinion, and you know, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Chief deserves representation? You know, Halo at all deserves representation? I will be covering more third parties in these following episodes, considering that I do in my heart of hearts believe that our final 2 characters for this pass will be third party, and so I want to cover as many third parties before, you know, maybe we might get like our next character reveal in May or at E3. I mentioned it in one of my videos, which you can check out in the outro of this video. And so I'm going to be covering a few more third parties, primarily Crash, Doom, and we'll see. You know, I'll go down the list on who I think, you know, at the end of the day, this is my personal opinion of what franchises I think deserve representation at all, right? Like, I'm not even saying it should be a fighter, I'm just saying representation, be it as a spirit or whatnot, just something, you know, me, costume, whatever. I do think these franchises deserve representation, so I will be covering a lot of third parties as the weeks go by. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please take care of yourselves, and as always, have an amazing rest of your day. Take care. Peace.
Coming through, partner, we can do this right. You're the fire, I'm the wind tonight. Burning dread, haha, that's right.